Hello everyone, my name is Mike Heck. I go by Madcap23 on most of the social media platforms. I'm a 3D printing enthusiast, but today I also wanted to talk about my other enthusiasm, my other hobby, which is tabletop RPGs. I'd like to give you a few thoughts on tabletop RPGs and running them as a game master, or the officiant, if you will. I have always thought that the general pre-created modules for running a campaign, Strahd or some of the other ones that are out there, tend to be very linear and almost railroady when it comes to how your players interact with the world. And while that's perfectly fine and works great in most cases, one of the things that I've found is that if you want your characters and your players to have multiple options on what to do, just so that they have fun and they can try to throw you for a loop, the best thing to do, in my opinion, is to write the story of the adventure, of the campaign, from the standpoint of your big boss, right? What is your big boss's end goal and how are they getting there? Make it a multi-step thing. So, for example, if the big boss has the idea that going somewhere and recovering relics from a bygone age is going to cause them to be able to conquer the world, you lay out a timeline and you say, they recruit minions and then they send the minions to do other things and find places, find maps, etc. And then what you do is you lay kind of breadcrumbs out for your characters. And what the character's goal is, well, the characters can have many goals if they want, but the one that should be running through their mind is, who is this boss that we have to defeat, and what can we do as we are now to ruin his plans or her plans? And that's something that you should probably be using. So, for example, in this case, the boss person has, I'm just going to say the boss lady, has this desire to collect artifacts that she knows will grant her power if multiple artifacts are gathered together and maybe assembled into some type of fantastical weapon. Well, you could throw like an archaeological dig as one of the adventures where your characters are hired on as bodyguards because this dig site has been raided by level appropriate monsters for X amount of time. And as they spend a night there, the monsters come in, they either defeat them or maybe a monster gets away with a piece that the archaeologist says that was one of the most important pieces of our stuff. And then the characters can make the decision, do we go after it or not? Now, if they don't, if they just say, okay, well, you've got other pieces, and they were really tough to beat, then you have two things as a DM that you can do. You can either say, well, that really wasn't the piece that they needed, or you can say, yeah, that was one of the pieces that the boss lady needed. And now, the next set of henchmen that our characters encounter will have an additional ability, or possibly have better magic weapons, or something that will set them above your normal type of creature that you're used to encountering. Which hopefully will then put the characters in the mind of, hey, if someone tells us that this was the most important thing for them, maybe we should make sure that we go out and go after it next time. And if that happens, then the other way, if they do choose to go after it, then you have a raid of a warren, if you will, a raid of a hive or settlement of whatever that level appropriate bad guy was. So for example, if you're at first levels, they would be things like kobolds or goblins. When you get up into 5th level or so, you could do gnolls or other, monstrous humanoids that have a level of intelligence that will allow them to be a minion of the big bad boss lady. So if they recover that artifact from this settlement or camp, then that will actually set the bad boss lady's plans back, and the next minions that you encounter will just be standard minions. And you keep this going until they're of a level appropriate to stand up to a boss lady that has at least one layer action and maybe 1 or 2 legendary actions in their back pocket. Now, if the characters don't do anything to push the boss lady's story off, then when they encounter the boss lady, they will likely be let somewhere around a level 20 with multiple legendary actions and multiple layer actions that they can use against the players. If they've done enough moving of that boss lady's story, they might be a lower level and have only, like I said, a couple legendaries and 1 layer action. Which still is going to be a difficult fight for any group to go against. But it could be worse, right? That's the way I do long-running campaigns, because I think that it gives the best open options for your characters, and it gives you a thread that you can put through all of the character story arcs. Now, talking about that, it is vitally important, in my opinion, and again, all of this is my opinion and what I've learned over the last 20 plus years of running Dungeons and Dragons through multiple different iterations. In my opinion, it is very important that as a DM, we take into consideration the backstories of our players, and we try to weave those into our own narrative. Because, aside from that story of the big bad boss lady that's in the back of your mind constantly, you are a co-author in your player's story. Because that's what this is. The adventure that you've set up, the world that you've set up, is not yours as the DM alone. The adventure in the world that you've set up is yours and your players. It is there for them and you to enjoy and have fun in. So if they've given you a backstory, you should try to use at least parts of those backstories whenever you can. Don't overdo it. It's a very fine line, a very fine balance that you have to achieve, where if you overdo it and focus on a single character for an entire adventuring session, people are going to expect that they're going to get that same type of focus, right? And if you don't have that in your mind, then people are going to be feeling disappointed. One of the things that I just did in a gaming session that we had was one of my players, her father was a first mate on a ship. And she got on board that ship. She was told by her parents to leave because there was something truly dreadful happening. They didn't tell her what it was, and she left that up to me, which is fantastic when your players do that for you. But when they got on the ship, she's not the paladin. She's a rogue, but she was neutral good. And then we had a paladin, and we had a cleric, and we had a fighter, and all of them found out that they were on a pirate ship. And the pirate captain gave them a choice of either joining the pirates or possibly being thrown into the sea. Well, thankfully, they had a couple people with really high charisma, and they were able to roll a natural 20 on the charisma check. So they got instead of just being tossed overboard, they were given a dinghy, and they rowed to shore. And then interesting things happened. But I gave them that choice. I said, this is what this really is. It's a pirate ship. Are you staying on board or not? And there was a veiled threat about they might be slitting their throats if they, try to leave or what have you. But I wasn't going to act on that. I wanted them to try to negotiate their way out. And the negotiation was a fairly low roll. They had to beat a DC 10. And so they did it. And they were able to get out, and they now are in a different adventure than I had initially planned for them, which is something I just had to roll with. But that was the story that they wanted to tell, because as much as I wanted them to become pirates, none of them did. And I mean, I could have said, well, tough crap, you're shanghaied into this, and you're going to be a pirate, whether you like it or not. But to me, that takes agency away from my players. And that's something that is the difference, in my opinion, between a good DM, an average DM, and a bad DM. Your good DMs will allow your players to have a level of agency that lets them feel like and know that they are telling their own story. An average DM will, well, I'm going to take that back. An average DM will do that too. But they'll say, like, in the case of what happened with me, to me, a good DM is the one that will go, okay, I'm going to just roll with the punches and I'll have something prepared and know where I'm going. Because I have that story of the big bad boss lady in the back of my head. And I know what's going to happen if they land on this continent or this continent or this continent, right? So the really good DMs will roll with the punches and just keep going. Your average DM would likely stop the night there. And there's nothing wrong with that, because not everyone can roll with the punches as quickly as some of us can. And in fact, there's been times when my players have thrown me for such a loop that I've had to say, okay, we're going to have to end here tonight because I need to go and figure out what the next steps would be in this adventure. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a perfectly acceptable thing for your dungeon master to say. That's a perfectly acceptable thing for you to say as a dungeon master. Because while we are expected to know everything about our world, sometimes just weird stuff comes from our players, right? The bad DMs, however, and this is my personal opinion, the bad DMs will take away all agency from their players. They'll look at their player and say, no, you're a pirate now. Doesn't matter if you think that your player or your character wouldn't do that. You're a freaking pirate. Go and be a pirate. Because that's what I had planned. And that's what you're going to do. That, to me, is not a good way of being a DM. Because you're robbing the characters of the ability to say, I want to explore this path. And that's something that all of the players should have the agency to do. Taken further than just, hey, I want you guys to be pirates, and they say no. I actually heard from one of my players that a DM that they were working with had actually forced their character to have consequences that were long-reaching and far worse than becoming a pirate without their input. In this case, they told me that their DM told their character that they had become pregnant. Even though their character had never said that they would have any type of relationships with anyone. And they were never given an opportunity to make those choices. So the player felt violated, basically, and I don't blame them. That is the mark of a bad DM, is a person who says, look, no matter what you want, this is the way that things are going to go. Now, I'm not telling you to let your players walk all over you. I'm not telling you to let your players just go do whatever and not have consequences for what they do. What I'm telling you is that you are a co-author of a story that you and your players are trying to tell. And you need to have that in mind every time that you come to the table. If a player has something in their backstory or has something in their character that doesn't seem to fit with what everyone else is doing, or is making it difficult for everyone else, it's at that point that you approach the player outside of the game. Or sometimes it's like, hey, you need to take 5. I need to talk with so-and-so over there about some stuff. And you take them aside. And talk to them about what's causing the issues. And you be an adult about it. And you say, look, these are some of the things that other players have expressed to me as issues. And we need to decide whether or not you think it's more important for your character to have this issue, or if it's more important to write a good story with the rest of your party. And at that point, then you have to decide if they say it's more important for me to have these issues. That's when you have to decide who's more important for the game. And it sucks, because there's going to be times where you have to tell that person, look, that's the way that is. Unfortunately, the rest of the party feels that that's very toxic, and I'd like to keep playing. And if I keep you, everyone else is leaving. And that sucks to have that conversation. But it's something you have to do if you want to keep your party going and you want to keep a good game happening. Yeah. With that, incorporate your, let's see, we talked about bad guy story arc. We talked about incorporating allowing your characters, your player characters, to have agency, not stomping on their backstory, not forcing them to do something that they don't want to do. Like I said, you could take a break if they go a completely different direction than you expected. The last thing I want to mention with the backstory stuff is don't spend an entire session on a single character's backstory early on, unless it's directly tied to the BBEG, the big boss ladies stuff that's happening. If you do that, and you do that often to one person, it will tend to make the rest of the group feel as if they are not important. It's great to sprinkle things in and have those things available, but don't do it right away. Let the party decide, hey, we heard about this from you. We're going to go and take care of it as a group. That's the best thing you can get. When your character's backstory is shared with the group, and the entire group says, hey, you know what? That unresolved thing that you have that brought you to journeying with us, let's go and take care of that. That's when you know that your group is together and it is 100% a decent group to keep going, because they care not only about each other as people, but they care about the other person's characters enough to say, I remember this part of your backstory. Let's go and try to have an adventure about that. And hopefully you get that at the end of the session, so that then you can madly scramble as the DM and create an entire backstory adventure for one of your characters. But it's got to be the player's choice. It can't be something that you force them to. With that, going to wish you that the dice are ever in your favor, and hope that you have a good rest of your day, night, evening, whatever it is that you're watching me at. Questions or comments, I'm always open to them. Leave them down below in the comments section, and I'd be more than happy to answer anything else in future videos. Hoping to do this like once a week, maybe twice a week. We'll see. Be good to each other. We will talk with you later.